Skal jeg bare begynne, eller? Ja. Welcome everybody to this meeting, information meeting on Artistic Research Fellowships 2018. It's a meeting for the ones that are considering applying for a research fellowship this year. Do you hear me well enough? Yeah, good. My name is Trond Losius and I'm head of research here at the school. And the purpose of this meeting is to try to provide you with as much relevant information as possible so that you can prepare, the best possible application for the research fellowship. We are videotaping this meeting, so it will also be available online afterwards, probably, hopefully tomorrow. I don't know how much work it is, but we'll try to make it available online as soon as possible after we've done today. And we also know that there are artists interested in applying from abroad. So we're doing all of this in English rather than Norwegian, because there might be some of you that are English speaking, and also in order to make this available online to provide the same information to everyone. But if you have questions, we'll have ample time for questions later on, and it's totally fine if you're question, if you're asking Norwegian, if you're more comfortable with that, and then we'll translate and reply in English. So I will do a kind of like a presentation first, talk about the program and how to do the application, and then we do the questions later on. So I'll just run through go through all of this first. So first, just to say a little bit about the Oslo National Academy of the Arts. It's an academy. We're working on education, research, and dissemination of the education and research. That's kind of like the main obligations we have in the communities, in society. And this school is divided into 6 different departments. We have the Academy of Fine Arts, which is working on visual arts. We have the Art and Craft department, and this is subdivided into 5 specialized areas: ceramics, graphic art, printmaking and drawing, textile art, metal and jewelry, and art in public spaces. Next we have the design department, which is also subdivided into several fields: graphic design and illustration, fashion and costume design, interior architecture and furniture design, and scenography. Might be that the scenography is moving to the theatre academy, but that's another story. Next we have the Academy of Dance, which is teaching dance with respect to classical ballet, jazz dance, and contemporary dance. They also offers education in choreography and a postgraduate certification of education. Then we have the Academy of Opera, which is specializing in opera, and this is a lot of what's going on there is in collaboration with the Norsk Musikkhøgskole. What's the name of that in English?
Academy of Music.
Academy of Music. Yeah. And finally, we have the Academy of Theatre, which is teaching acting, instruction or directing, playwright, and scenography. So these are sort of like the fields, artistic fields that the school is working within with respect to the teaching. The artistic research is one of the strategical development areas of the school currently. There's an ongoing coordinated effort to strengthen the artistic research and its dissemination within the school, with a number a number of kind of like strategic goals for this. One of this, which I just have in Norwegian here, is that we were very recently accredited as a specialized university, which is something that we worked towards for many years. We're working on national and international partnerships to strengthen our activities. And this accreditation here is giving us some new both responsibilities but also freedoms in terms of how we are can set up education at all the levels, bachelor and master, and also establish a PhD degree, which is another thing that we're currently working on. And I wanted to say just a little bit about what artistic research is. This is a question that is coming up in conversations with me all the time, also with staff here. And what is the difference between artistic practice and artistic research? And very recently, when the Ministry of Research and Education decided to establish a PhD in artistic research, they were writing a letter on this, which is giving a quite precise, brief description of it, which I think is one of the shortest and best ways of phrasing this that I've seen to this day. So in Norwegian, this is kunstutøvelsen skal stå i sentrum for doktorgradsarbeidet. Samtidig skal kunstutøvelsen følges av en eksplisitt refleksjon, som ved presentasjon av prosjektet gjør det mulig for andre å ta del i den arbeidsmåten og innsikten som det kunstneriske utviklingsarbeidet genererer. And in Norwegian, this is my, and Google translates a collaboration on it, which is artistic practice will be at the core of the doctoral degree. At the same time, the artistic practice is to be accompanied by an explicit reflection that, when presenting the project, enables others to take part in methods and insights generated by the artistic research. So there's like this component of not just doing the artistic work itself, that, not just having the artistic practice, but also being sharing the methods you're working with, how you're working, and the reflections, the insights that this is leading to. Somehow also sharing your practice with others so that it can be taken into consideration by other artists in the various fields that we're working within. And this is sort of like the main thing that is distinguishing artistic research as compared to artistic practice, where you don't necessarily have to do this kind of sharing. Sharing the artworks in themselves might be sufficient. So the Artistic Research Fellowship Program, which is the program that we have currently announced these positions for, was established in 2003 as a national collaboration between a number of arts educations within all artistic disciplines: music, visual arts, performative arts, film, design, architecture. And this program has been running since then. It is currently maintained or kind of like now organized by the National Artistic Research Program, which in English is abbreviated to NARP. And in Norwegian, the name of this is Program for kunstnerisk utviklingsarbeid. And then in Norwegian, the abbreviation is PKU. So you might sometimes see the NARP abbreviation and sometimes the PKU, but that's the same thing, just if you come across them. And NARP is administrating the current artistic research program. They are also administrating a project program, which is more of a research program for academic staff, similar to how academic staff within universities can apply to the Norwegian Research Council for research funding. This is funding towards artistic research within the art institutions. But there is a number of restructuring going on currently. One thing is that PKU or NARP used to be a small organization of its own, but it's now being merged with the Center for Internationalization of Education, abbreviated to CU in Norwegian. And also there are changes happening to the PhD degree, or we are in the transition to a formal PhD in artistic research, which I'll say a little bit more about. And here at Oslo National Academy of the Arts, we are working towards establishing a PhD in the winter or spring 2018. It's not very far away, we believe, that we'll have this one established. But because we're announcing these positions before we have this up and running, the positions are announced using the current program, but the idea is that all of these positions will be transitioned to the new program, and probably this will happen so early on that they are transitioned before one actually start work on it, so that one's admitted straight into the new program. But we're using the current program for announcing these positions. I will recommend that you're checking out the website for NARP, artisticresearch.no. So I'll probably be back to this one later on. This is the website in Norwegian and in English. So I just switch to English. There we go. There's some quite useful information for you to find here that I recommend that you check out, in particular under the fellowship program, and in particular then when you get to the guidelines for it. I'll come back to this later on. There we're back. Good. So, we're about to establish a PhD here in Oslo, and there's always, when this topic comes up, there's a number of questions. The first is when, and the answer is pretty soon. The next question is, will the new positions be part of this? And the answer is yes. And then the third question that very often comes up is if this will lead to radical changes in the program as compared to the artistic research program that we have today. And the answer to that is no. The main thing about establishing this PhD is not to make this a more theoretical, academic, writing-based program where the artistic practice becomes a smaller part of the program. The main thing about getting this title is that this has been, since 2003, a third cycle program. It's on the same level as other PhDs in Norway, and what we're doing now is simply that the program is getting a formalized title. It's giving a formal qualification in a way that it hasn't done up until today. But I often see expectations that this will lead to academization of the art and the artistic research. But we will insist on keeping the artistic practice at the core of this program also when we do this transition. We have quite a few artistic research fellows within the school currently, 21 altogether, and I hope I've been doing counting right here. But we have 4 within the Academy of Fine Arts, 4 at Art and Craft, 4 at Design, 4 at Dance, 2 at Opera, and we have 3 at the Academy of Theatre. So that's 21 altogether. And in addition to this, we have 1 candidate that is at the very end of his research fellowship. So he's not employed any longer here, but we're just waiting for the committee to give the final approval of his reflection, and then he will be doing his viva voce and be done. So I have quite a few artistic research fellows at the school. And our goal in the future is to sort of, gradually increase this number a bit more so that we get like a critical mass of research fellows that really becomes like a research community within the school, both between the research fellows or PhD candidates, but also alongside the rest of the academic staff and students within the department. And we believe that over the next 3, 4, 5 years, the impact of the PhD candidates on the activities in the school will become more and more strong and pronounced and exciting. So I think it's a very interesting time to enter into this program as a candidate here. We have 6 vacancies in 2018 within the following subject areas. And these subject areas, they differ very much from one department to the next. And the reason for this is that the different departments have been quite free to formalize, to kind of express what they want themselves. So some are very broad, very general, others are very specific, but this has been left to the departments to choose. So at the dance department, we have a research fellow, there's a possibility for a research fellow in choreography. At the design department, there's room for a research fellow in interior architecture and furniture design. We have printmaking, drawing, or textile, or metal jewelry, or art in public spaces at the arts and craft department. So you will notice that the only thing missing here from the art and craft department is ceramics, and it's simply because we already have 2 research fellows working a lot with ceramics, so we don't have the capacities in the workshops for more working in ceramics currently, unfortunately. At Fine Arts, Academy of Fine Arts, there's one in visual art, and Oprah is the one that has the most specific, detailed description of it. They're interested in a research fellow that will be exploring the human voice, working with challenges, possibilities, singing techniques, and maintenance as related to classical operatic voice. So that's their what they are looking for. And finally, in theatre, they are looking, defining this quite broadly. It can include acting, directing, writing, scenography, and dramaturgy, with a preference for projects that contribute to the development of this course at the Academy of Theatre. So that's the 6 positions that we have, or the 6 fields, subject areas, where we are looking for artistic research fellows this time. And altogether we have 6 positions. So what is this artistic research fellowship? And sometimes, I get these comments, that it's just like, it's a really, really great work grant, but it's not. This is not a work grant. It's something else and something more. It's an opportunity for in-depth research over a prolonged period of time. And it's also a 3rd cycle study program. So if someone's thinking of applying mainly because they need an income for the next 3 years, don't. That's not really a point in doing that. But if you're at a point in your career where you have some burning issues in the practice, something that you really need to work on, and this is something that you need to work on for a prolonged period of time, and it's difficult to find a room of that within the current framework of what you can and can't do with your practice, then this might be the right thing. But this artistic research fellowship project really should be, wanting to research something in depth. So it's a study program, and as a study program, it's a 3-year study program consisting of 3 parts. There is a research school, which is an introduction to and a training in artistic research. This equals 20 ECTs, or like 2/3 of one semester. 1 full semester would be 30 ECTs, study points. And this research school is done in collaboration between all of the art educational institutions around Norway. So it's a very cross-disciplinary program. It's exciting to be part of it. You get to build a very wide network with fellow research fellows from other institutions. You get quite deep insights into the practices and the research going on within a variety of fields. And the research school is set up so that there is a number of seminars that you have to attend, and there are also 2 forums or symposia a year that you also need to attend, where the research fellows are presenting their projects, and also projects that are funded by the project program are presented. So it's quite interesting thing to be part of. In addition to this, there is a project-specific part equaling 10 study points. This is individual. This is meant to be different kind of education, skill building, knowledge building, sort of like any kind of like education that directly support your project. Which means that the study plan for this is set up individually by each research fellow in collaboration with a supervisor, and then approved by the school. But this is where you might, want to attend symposia, seminars, or kind of like do in-depth studies of biennals or exhibitions that you want to visit, read books, literature, learn new skills, whatever that is directly needed for your project. And then the main part of this is the artistic research project itself. And this equals 150 study points, or 2.5 years of the 3 years time. So this is kind of like the main thing of it. So I'm going to go more into details, but in addition to the information that I'm giving you, I'm really encouraging you to, when you work in an application, to check and read and check the guidelines of the artistic research program, because they're quite detailed in terms of what they're expecting. And I think if you read them, you can get a lot of help with ensuring that you're including information that we will be looking for when we're assessing the applications. So here's the link for this in Norwegian and in English. I'll also make this this presentation available online afterwards. But I think we can just take a look at the English guidelines, and I think I have them already on my computer. I'm just going to find the right document here. Guidelines. There we go. So here are the guidelines. They're kind of like lengthy. I don't recall exactly how many pages, but there are a few. So there's a lot, but the structure of them is that there is this kind of like an introduction that is giving a general introduction about the program. Then comes admission, and this is where a lot of the information about like applications, what has to be considered when applying is. So this part, the part 2, I recommend reading. Then comes one section that is about sort of like the implementation, or in Norwegian it would be the gjennomføring, kind of like what's going on, kind of like regulations over the 3 years that this is lasting. And finally comes, there's one here on the project, which is definitely worth reading, section 10. And finally, there's a part about the completion, the assessment. I also recommend reading this, because somehow when we're evaluating the projects, we're evaluating them in ways where we, try to see what these projects might end up as. So a lot of the expectations are expressed not just earlier on in terms of admission or the discussing the project as such, but also relative to assessment. So really recommend study the regulations here. But we've tried to distill the most important information of this for you. So go back. Oops, extended. There we go. Yeah. So going back here, I'll now try to say a little bit about, or say something about the application. When applying, the things that need to be part of the application, and what we will be looking for, what we're expecting. And the first thing we ask ourselves, is, we listen to Jimi Henry and ask, are you experienced? So the first thing here is, what are the requirements for being qualified for this program? And I quoted the guidelines here. They say that in order to admit it to the research fellowship program, an applicant must be able to document recognized artistic work or artistic research of a certain scope, and normally hold a master degree. So we're looking for 2 things. We're looking educationally for the master degree, and we're also looking for some experience, which need to be documented. And then one of the questions we often get is, is it possible to apply if I have worked in the field for many years, but I don't have the master degree? And the answer is that yes, that is possible. Because there's a second thing here, which says that on the basis of individual assessments, institutions may approve other equivalent competence as the basis of admission. And in Norwegian, we would call this realkompetanse. But this is something that, whether you are fulfilling one or the other here, is something that you have to provide information about your qualifications to us. So in the application, you need to provide a CV. You need to provide documentation of education and relevant work experience. And you need to provide documentation of artistic practice. And you can provide documentation of up to 10 works. All this documentation has to be submitted digitally. Documentation of artistic works can also be in the form of hyperlinks to a web page. And in that case, an overview, a list of URLs serve as attachment. And when you're submitting this documentation, the question we are asking us is, are you qualified? Do you have the qualification, the formal qualification required enter the program. And the other question that we answer us, or that we ask ourselves, is also whether you have some prior experience that is sort of like motivating or giving you like a point of departure for what you want to do in your artistic research project. So when you try to submit documentation, or when you submit documentation of artistic works, it's good if you can show that there is a certain variety, richness, sort of like a certain broadness of experience, but also that there is a specialization that draws towards what you want to work on in the artistic research fellowship. Is that clear? Yeah, good. So this is the first thing, we're asking ourselves, whether you're ready to enter this program. And then the next thing is the artistic research project itself. You will need to provide a project description as part of the application. And the central question here is, what do you want to research? I think that's the first question you should ask yourself. What do you want to research? So, if you don't know the answer to this to this question, then I think it's better to keep pondering that until you have a clear answer to it. And I also have to say that, just looking at the number of people that attended here today, which we're very grateful for, it's clear that the competition is tough here. So, and it's a lot of work with application. So my advice to you is to try to make this application process something that is useful for yourself, even if you don't get accepted into the program. I think anyone that has been working as artist for a while have experience with having applications of different kinds being rejected. But even when that happens, sometimes, most of the time when I'm writing applications myself, I try to make that writing a productive thing for myself, that I use it to articulate for myself, what I want to do, think of it, push my own ideas further, and maybe if I don't get, like the funding or whatever I'm applying for, maybe still there's room for me to pushing these ideas and working on them afterwards. So I really recommend, try to write the application from that perspective, because it's more useful for you regardless of the outcome here, but I also think that it's giving you a better application. So in the project description, you need to describe the research topic or theme or questions. So basically, what is it about? What is sort of the core of what you want to work on? That you can identify that it's not a number of things that are just like vaguely linked, but that there's like a unity to it, there's a focus to it. In research, one's talking about a research question. Some artists do that too, and some artists find that a very unproductive way of phrasing it, because it's not a question that should have an answer, but it's more a field or a topic that you want to explore and get experience with. But make sure that there is a core. There's a core that you want to work on, and that you manage to state quite clearly what that is, so we understand what you want to do. How is your project situated in relation to relevant context? This is also an important part. Sometimes one sees applications that are not referencing anything else, and it's as if the artist is working on an island, completely isolated from everyone else, and is inventing everything for him or herself, which is of course never the case. So there's something about trying to see where what you want to do belong in a larger context and reference that context. And I think here it's less useful to just name drop a lot of things, but rather to look towards other artistic practice that somehow is informing what you're doing themselves. You're inspired by them, or you are, you're repelled by what they're doing, or there's something there that you want to use, but at the same time you want to combine this with something else. Use the works of other artists, of artistic fields, of disciplines, of theoretical thinking as a way of, describing and clarifying what you want to work on yourself, and how that, by describing how it relates to a number of things. That's the better way of doing that. Next comes what are the how do you account for the methods? What methods are you going to use? And this is a very important point as well, because I think sometimes one's really almost obsessed with some kind of topic, and reading, thinking about it, and really can write long essay about like why this topic is interesting. But then there's a lack of a description of how are you going to approach this topic through your artistic practice. Where do you start? The first day you start working with this, what do you actually do? So the next thing here is to say, how are you going to work with what you're going to work with? What are the methods? And it's not that we are looking for very strict methods necessarily, because I think often artists use like many methods, and inconsistency can be a principle too in artistic practice, I think, sometimes. But there's something about being articulate about how you want to work with it and why you want to work that way. Why does it make sense to work this way when you want to work with what you want to work with? The next question is, what kind of results will this project lead to? And the current regulations, they are linking this to kind of like artistic works, to format. This is something that we might be easing up a bit in the new PhD program, making more flexible, for instance, making more room for process-oriented practices where the process is more important than the results that it's really leading to. But that's a different discussion. But somehow, what you do has to be shared with others. It has to come out in one way or another. So what will your work, your research lead to? How will this be shared, disseminated to the rest of the world? And we're looking here for artistic practices that are operating on in a way that feels relevant to the national and to the international fields. So this is something that you have to say something about. And one of the things we're looking for here is also to try to imagine what the final presentation of your artistic research might be like, what formats you might want to work with there, so that we can imagine that this can lead to something that can be assessed at the end of it. And of course, 3 years into time with a lot of research in between, of course there are a lot of possibilities for this changing along the way, but it's still good to have an initial idea of what it might be like. And how will you be working on reflection? How will you approach reflection? How will you work with reflection? How will you share your reflections? This is also something that needs to be part of the project description. If there are ethical issues, ethical concerns that comes up in your project, then you should discuss them too. And it's not that you can't work with things that have ethical issues, but something about then dealing with them in a reflected and responsible way. So if there are ethical questions in your ethical issues in your project, then we recommend that you are also discussing how you will be approaching that. And finally, as part of all of this, it's good if we can somehow read out, to what degree the project will contribute to the development of relevant artistic fields. And I guess this is something that's often quite difficult to say something about. If you're a modest person, it's difficult to answer this directly. So I often recommend, kind of like writing this very indirectly by just writing about, what you want to do, what questions you're working with. It becomes clear that there is sort of like a new take on something. There is a new perspective here. There is the potential for this, becoming or working with things that are considered relevant and sort of urgent currently, and that might really contribute, without having to start bragging about it. So the project description you write as a text document, maximum 3,500 words. And I think it's fine to include images here also, if that helps your discussion. So it's just that there's a limit to how long this can be, because someone actually have to sit down and read all of these applications. And I think sometimes it's easier to write 60 pages than writing 5 pages about something. So there's also something about, limiting the size of it is a good way of trying to improve the quality of it. So, how do you apply? And now we're on a very practical level, and recommend that you check this out a little more than 1 day before the application deadline, that you look into the application forms, etc. Early on, so you know what you need to prepare. So the announcement of the position is at the KHiO website, and the applications are filed online via Jobb Norge, which is this job application platform that's used a lot in Norway. So just going to look at that briefly. So if we look at the KHiO website, there we go. I hope you know that all the way throughout, that somewhere on the page you will always find this article. Oops, sorry, mirror display. There we go. I hope that you know that this doesn't disappear because of other news, because this is quite important to us. So do you want to become a research fellow at KHiO? So if you follow this link, you get to this page, and it's also in Norwegian if you need that. And that's a lot of the all of the information that I'm providing today is also here. And there's a form here that you have to download and fill in. So the link for that is here. This form is available in Bokmål nynorsk and in English. So if you go to the Norwegian version of this site, you will find it in the 2 Norwegian varieties. And you also find a link somewhere here. You will find a link to the Jobb Norge itself. I just have to look around. Apply at Jobb Norge. There you go. And then you get to Jobb Norge. And then you get in. You have to probably make an account, or if you have been in there early on, you have an account already. And when you logged in, you get to the first of 5 screens, where you're writing like an application text, and this is more like a general application text. This can be brief, because what we really look at is the project description, the CV, documentation of your works, and so on. So you don't have to make this application too long, I think. And then there's a number of information about yourself you have to provide. You have to provide a CV here by putting in details about yourself, all kinds of stuff. And then there's a number of attachments that you can upload, and this is where you're uploading all of the attachments that you have prepared for this. Make sure that you save along the way, because it's a classic with these online forms. It's a classic that the website crash when you've done a lot of work on it. So just save regularly. Oops, there we go. So you will need this application form that is on this KHiO website. I'll look into that a little bit more too later. And you file it via Jobb Norge, and then the additional attachments that you need is this application attachment, the project description, a budget proposal, a complete CV, and documentation of artistic practice. So that's what needs to be in the application. And I now want to say a little bit about the budget. And I guess all of you have experience with setting up budgets for projects you're doing yourself. Here we want to see sort of like an estimated budget for all 3 years of the Artistic Research Fellowship. And we know that this is likely to change along the way, but we need a realistic budget so that we can kind of like see if this is a project that we actually are able to support. And it's a project that can be carried out. It doesn't depend on financial incomes that are unrealistic, so that if we accept it, then the whole project is in jeopardy because of a lack of funding later on. So provide a preliminary project budget, outlining costs relating to the research project, and we assess this based on the realism of it. It should include all costs related to the implementation of the project, including activities and research of the full project period, such as study and project travels, literature, equipment, materials, purchase of goods and services, production costs relating to presentation of artistic works for the final evaluation. It's very important that you are, thinking specifically about what kind of budget you believe you will need for the final assessment, because the general experience is that at least half of the budget goes there. That's a major part of the cost over these 3 years. So if you have a really good budget for the first 2 years and then you underestimate that, this might become a challenge at the end of the project. Documentation, work on documentation or publication of documentation, publications, dissemination on web, and all kinds of costs really. And I'm sure that you're used to setting up these kind of budgets. So any kind of cost that you're used to budgeting for and have to plan for and know that come in the kind of project you're doing should be in here. The budget needs to detail costs per year for the fellowship period, and it should be made clear whether the project depends on additional external funding. That very often happens, that you, for instance, depending on funding from KHiO or the Norwegian Art Council or elsewhere. And in that case, also make an overview of incomes so that you have a total budget. But in this budget, you can estimate an approximately 300,000 as the contribution that KHiO can give towards this. And that is for the entire fellowship period, so it's not per year. But for the entire period, you can estimate roughly 300,000. And of course, this budget is something, if you get accepted, that we will have to negotiate with you later on. But this is kind of like to give you some guidelines, so you're not completely in the blue of what to expect from KHiO when you're setting up this. And there's some costs that should not be included here, because they're covered elsewhere. I mean, we have them in the budget elsewhere. So you don't include salary for yourself as a research fellow, and you don't include salary for the supervisors or the assessment committee at the end of it. You don't include budget for the office space or like the place that you're working from at KHiO here. We do provide you with a modest phone and computer. This is sort of like not too fancy cell phone and an OK PC. But if you know that you will need something else, I mean, many artists use Macs instead and will have want a more powerful Mac, then like the difference between this would need to be in your budget. And also, costs related to participation in the National Research School are also not to be included on your budget. So it's the cost directly linked to your artistic research, not all the other costs that are coming, because you're employed here for those 3 years. Also in the application form, we have a field, for a timeline in order to see like a sketch of how you see yourself dividing work and tasks and goals over 3 years. Sometimes I see these timelines detailed down to week by week, which is too much, So think of this in terms of half a year at a time. And allow yourself also flexibility, because of course plans change as the project develops. I mean, we do expect that the projects change when you start doing that. I mean, if you know everything before you start, it's not any research here. But still that you have like an idea of how you're going to start this, how you're going to approach it, and the things that you know that you want to do within the 3 years, when you will do them, and approximately how much time that takes. Yes?
I just have a small comment.
Yeah.
The 10T ECTS is the specific course.
Yes.
Needs to be included in the budget because it's not covered by these.
That's true. That's true. Thanks. That's true. Yeah. So.
If there are
yeah, I will repeat that. That's true. If we go all the way back to early on, we were talking about that we had 20 study points for the research school, and then 30 study points that are project specific, and then 150. If, as part of your 10 study points of project specific courses, if as part of that you need you will have expenses for books, for travels, for attending courses, external courses, or anything else. That need to be included in your budget as well. Yeah, thank you very much. Clear? Good. Yeah, timeline we talked about. So, talking about the assessment of the application and the recruitment procedures, the application deadline is March 15, and there will be no prolongation here. You know, that's totally clear because we've really squeezed for time. So there will be no possibilities for delivering applications late. They have to be delivered March 15. And probably that means like 23:59 on your Norge, I guess. So, yeah. All the applications are, you know, like sorted by department, and then they will be assessed by internal assessment committee within the department, and they will decide on what they consider to be the most relevant candidates. They will be invited to interviews, and afterwards, the candidates they still consider most relevant, their applications will be sent to external peer review. And when this peer review comes back, you know, assuming that the peer reviews are positive, there's a final decision on priorities within each department, and then we do the final decisions on who are getting offers for positions. And we hope that we have this done before the summer. I mean, that's the goal, but we have a very, very tight schedule for ourselves because we are announcing the positions much later than we used to, which is due to the transition to the PhD that has left a number of questions a bit in the limbo for us for a while. And the research fellows start October 1st. And a few minor final details that I wanted to mention to you as well. You can apply, I mean, in terms of the language you can use the application, it's totally fine to use Scandinavian languages. You're welcome to do that. You can also apply in English. So that's your choice. As a research fellow, we expect you to live in Oslo and work here at the Oslo National Academy of the Arts. So that's important to be aware of. And also, in the past, using the regulations for the Statistic Research Fellowship Program, there's been, because this program didn't give a formal title, but it gave you an associate professor competency. You know, because of this, it had the regulation saying that if you already had a full or associate professor competency, førstekompetanse in Norwegian, then you would be overqualified. This is no longer a topic when we get the new PhD, and for this reason, we've decided that we are ignoring that requirement this time. So if you want to apply, but you do have a full associate professor competency already, you're still welcome to apply, because we expect that already before we start, we have moved the applicants to the new PhD program. And if you have further questions after today, I mean, these are the persons you can contact. If there are general questions regarding like applications, it's Linda Tu and Teresa Veia. They are sitting over here. That's Linda waving and Teresa waving slightly less. They are both working in the research administration, and they are very, very helpful. So they would be the first two to ask. And if you have something very specific relating to one of the specialized fields for these announcements, then you can contact the deans of the various departments. And I have to say that we expect quite a lot of applications, so it's very limited how much we can we can't really supervise. We don't have the resources to really supervise applications. If you have questions, we'll try to answer those, clarify those questions for you as far as we can, but we don't have the resources to sit down and start supervising applications. And there's also something about, giving everyone like fair conditions for applying here. Instead, what we'll do is that when it's decided who's accepted into the program within the first 3 months, we will be revising the project description in the startup phase of it. So I think that was the information that I had prepared. And one final thing I just want to say, because again, having applied many times for different kind of funding bodies and so on, and sometimes you get the money, sometimes you don't. We really appreciate that you take the work to apply here. Even if you don't get accepted here, use this opportunity to think of your own practice and make kind of like a long-term plan for your own practice. If you maybe you get in, but I'm sure there will be a lot of artists doing really interesting, worthwhile work that clearly would be appropriate for the program. It's just that we only have 6 positions. So yes. So we have some questions now. We have one question there first.
Yes, I wonder how you relate to if...
We have the microphone, so we'll just hand that over first, because then maybe we catch the questions on tape to you.
Hi. I wonder how you relate to if your project kind of falls between the different art departments. And if you should then apply 2 different applications to the different art departments, or would you go in with supervising, looking at the project first before saying where you should apply for it? Because at your there you go specific, right?
No, in Jobb-Norge, to answer that in how this looked in Jobb-Norge, I'll just take that one first. There's one application for all. I mean, it's not like 6 different, and then you have to choose which one you're applying for. It's announced as one position, apply one place, but in addition to that, this form that you have to fill in, I'm going to show that quickly. There we go. This form that you fill in looks like this, and there's some name, and here you check where you belong, and then your question is what if you are in between. Let's come back to that later and just look at the form first, because I forgot about that. Then you have to provide a work title, the short abstract, the summary of your project, the progress plan. So the progress plan goes here. And then here is detailed further, all of the attachments that need to be included. So what do you do if you have like a cross-disciplinary project that really could belong within 2 departments? I think my first advice would be to consider if it belongs, like 51% or more in one department and 49% or less in another department. That would be one way of going. You could also file it twice, and putting it to the 2 different departments. Or can't you? No, you can only file it once, they say. Okay. But I think what I would do then is to, it's kind of like, it's a Word document, so you can write, where you're not allowed to here. I think, then I would kind of like state that this is a project that really is in, like interdisciplinary between 2 departments, and ask for it to be considered as such. And then
there is a question then about also the department, because it would maybe, of course, formulate it differently, but it's different things that each department could get out of that PhD, which are very different things when you are in 2 fields as an artist.
Do we have prior experience or routines for this, or is this no?
We have lots of experience.
No, because there's some change. I mean, this is the first time we're deciding everything ourselves, and I have to admit that we haven't thought of it. I suggest, what you do, could you email us a question on this, to Linda or Teresa, and then we come back to you, because then we can think of it a bit more.
But it's really interesting for maybe more people to hear.
Yeah.
So if you
I can tell you the experience, because the experience is actually that the committees at the departments, they are looking into their field, and if they find something that is not in their field, when they find applications that are not in their field or just a bit in their field, they tend not to be considered in the same way. So I suggest, like Trond says, that you send me the ones that have interdisciplinary send an email upfront because this is a problem. And the ones that have applied before, they know this also, that it is a problem. But on the other hand, most of these are very broad. I mean, you can dive into choreography and you can work with whatever, text, you can work with visual art, so it's a way of defining your project as well. Because they are all expanding their fields and...
but it still comes down to the department. It's the department who wants this specific artistship to question your department, no? It's not the whole KHiO that decides on... So why not open it so that we could put in more applications and then state that we're putting it at both fields, so you know? But then the department could take a stance on if they are interested in that towards their department.
Yeah. I think
still a different thing.
I think probably, I mean, this is also formally that you can only apply once in your blog, I guess. So there's kind of like some systemic things here. Yeah. But so I think you can only apply once. But I think, definitely sort of like write it if it's clear that your project is cross-disciplinary between departments, but still write one application for it. And I think that we will have to think a bit more about exactly how we do this, so that we're not losing out on good projects because they are of this kind. And I don't know how far I can answer you today, but we will discuss this further, I think, internally. Kind of like take it as a challenge. And if we come up with additional important information, I think that what we will be doing is, because all applicants should have access to the same information. So I think at somehow maybe at the end of this page, and then in Norwegian and in English, we will, if there come this kind of questions that we think that all applicants should have access to the answers of, we'll try to add those answers there. Yes? Yeah,
but I think this is not the first time we hear this challenge or this problem. So what I urge you to do is to, for those of you who sort of meet that challenge, please submit an email and because what we've usually done is actually advising the applicants as to where, to what department to submit the application to. And we can do that again, but I would assume that we wouldn't have to do that for all applications. No. It will apply to certain applications. So at least that's the experience we have. Yeah.
And also just and not that I'm suspecting anyone of doing it, but sort of, if you are doing tipping and you're crossing all three because it's a higher chance of winning, that's not the way to do it here. I mean, it's like if you have the project that really are between two departments or more, that's really stated. But there's no point in crossing everything just because you're increasing your luck. Like the general thing is that we will be handing down one place, and it might be that there might be some applications that we have to scratch our head a bit about what to do about. So I'll continue. I know there were lots of questions. I've kind of forgot who was, but back there.
I have a question about the budget. If you work in dance or theater, can you use the students for your research, or do you have to employ dancers and actors from outside the school?
I think that's the students are students, so they're part of it. I mean, there's certain things they're supposed to do as a student. So I think if you can set up ways of working that are engaging the students, and it really makes sense for them as students in terms of their study plan, then that would probably be a good thing. I mean, that would be what we call in Norwegian forskningsbasert undervisning, or research-led education. But if on the other hand it's just that you need lots of dancers and you want to cut your budget, and then they end up doing something that not really contributes to their education, then I think rather should be looking for funding for the dancers.
Very often they are busy, the students.
Yes, that's also a challenge. That's also a challenge, and it's also, I mean, one thing I didn't say today is that, I mean, it's like in terms of facilities, we have fantastic facilities here at the school in terms of workshops and the stages. But be aware that because you become a research fellow here, it's not very likely that you'll get access to a stage every week, every year, while you're here. That's like a lot of pressure for all of these spaces. So and we have to prioritize. So it's just so that kind of know what's reasonable to expect here. We try to facilitate, but within.
So
we're
what
in
you
reason.
say is that you have to add in the budget external actors.
Yeah, I think so. Yes. Yeah. And
can I just say that normally the fellows use agreements that are between Norske Dansekunsten, so they use the sort of the fees that are agreed upon. So you have to
Professional fees,
calculate those in.
Yeah.
It's about the documentation of the statistics. What kind of can you use both the JPEG and the PDF? Which size on the
there might be that if you try to upload really large attachments that Jobb Norge starts complaining, the same way that the Art Council does. But I think you can upload pretty much anything. But one way of doing it is to see if you can make like one document per project, and then maybe have this as a PDF, and then you're including photos. If you have photos, several photos or illustrations, and you have text, you include that, and then you provide links to sound or video material that you can't embed in a PDF. But the PDF format is a very safe format to use because everyone managed to read it as long as it's not using like the fancy stuff of Adobe Acrobat. Then everyone can read it. So you're pretty sure that that your documentation can be accessed, and you also have a way of laying out text and images in a way that creates the kind of narrative of the project that you want.
I was wondering what happens if you want to work with a private company because they have the technology and the resources that you want. Who owns the research? What happens if that company wants to have part of it?
Yeah, there are regulations for this. There are some regulations for this, and they might or might not kind of answer it. I'll just find these. And these regulations might be slightly different in the new PhD program. But in general, the idea is that research that is publicly funded should be publicly available. And like the Ministry of Research and Education has a policy on open access, that things should be openly accessible. But I think, let's see, do you remember anything about that, Torben?
I remember in our new...
we have it in the new, I know. So I'm just going to scroll through here. I think, it would take a while to figure out here. There are regulations for it, in particular in the new PhD. I know, we were looking at this the other day, and there are regulations for this, that in general it should be open access. But there are, for instance, a possibility to hold things back at the end from being publicly available so that it can be patented, for instance, first. But I think the most important thing to do in the application is then to describe, outline what the issue is so that we can consider it. And please read the regulations, see what they're saying, and then maybe this is something that will need to be discussed further before one can commit to the project.
And send it to you so you can put it on screen if you want.
Yeah, I can tell this now.
Returning to budget, if you have a project, it is desirable to introduce projects which are cross-funded by, for example, Kulturrådet and other sources, and if so, how do you handle that in the budget? For example, if you apply for theatre and you have the question of hiring actors and so on, is it beneficial to show that you bring in money from the outside to finance the employment of actors, and maybe also a place for rehearsals, since you just said that you don't have many spaces for it? So how do you look at these things? Or do you want a budget which is only concerned with the money from KHiO and doesn't take into account external money at all?
No, I mean the two questions we want an answer to is, is your project possible to do? And of course, if we see that this is a very costly project and we know that we can only contribute so much, then to see that there is also a possibility for you, that it's likely that you're able to secure external funding in addition to it, that kind of helps your application. So I would say, make a total budget, and maybe then you make a total budget, but you could also sort of divide between the costs that are then covered by KHiO and the costs that are covered elsewhere. Because, this is the situation for a lot of district research fellows currently, that they are getting project funding. There's even a few that has this basisfinansiering as scenekunstnere. And what they do is then they are kind of running their company, so they're running their enkeltmannsforetak, and they're taking costs there, and then other costs are covered by KHiO. But the agreement is that they can't take a salary from their enkeltmannsforetak while they're here, because they already get a fee from us, so they have to spend this towards their project. But I think like being able to use Art Council funding is often critical for being able to do projects. So just kind of clarify what it looks like, and so that we know that the project can be done. We also can see that that the expectations for what we have to provide is realistic.
Right. Time being as short as it is, what is the institution's attitude towards tying up loose ends? For example, if you have a few exhibitions lined up or projects that are operating, which may or may not tie into the research itself. Say, for example, I had a couple of shows in the autumn, but I can't cancel those, etc.
This is also very common. We had actually this. We've had this in the past too, that we've had to take this into concern. There are certain activities that are very important that you're part of when you start. There's like an introductory week or program here that you need to be part of, and there are like the seminars that are running within this research school. It's very important that you can participate in them. But apart from that, we understand the situation and we try to be flexible if that's what's needed initially. But this is something that is also very, it's nice if it's useful for us if this is also clarified in the application, and it won't necessarily, it won't affect the application negatively as long as you're not talking about like massive delays. It's like, if you would be 1 year delayed, then maybe you should wait 1 year with applying. So, but if we're talking about some flexibility for the first few months, that's something that can be negotiated.
I was wondering, you have your deadline now on 15th of March, but do you know already if you were mentioning that within the next years you might be opening for more fellowships and all this. Mm-hmm. Will there also be a deadline next year and the year after that? Do you know these things?
Yeah, like the formal decisions haven't been done yet, but the plan is that we should be able to announce positions more or less the same time as we've been doing in the past, which I think is that we're announcing them like October, November, with a deadline in January, deadline 1st of December. So something like that. So we expect to be announcing new positions sometime after summer, and so that we can have like a recruitment of more research fellows starting October every year, but not putting ourselves on such a tight schedule that we are on this time.
Two quick questions. Supervision. Can you talk a little bit more about that process in terms of, can we work with people? Like, do they have to be local? Can they be on the other side of the world? How does that process work a little bit? And then also, Do we have any teaching responsibilities, or is that departmental? I'm not sure.
Yeah, and now you're asking of this, provided that you've been accepted,
yes.
You're talking about, during the 3 years. So the normal thing is that you have 2 supervisors. One supervisor should be within, the main supervisor should be within this institution. And that's not just to have a, not just to have a, but that supervisor has some additional roles to just be supervising on the artistic side of what you're doing, but they also are expected to know the program, being able to mentor you with how your project needs to progress to fulfill the requirements of the program, so on, and know the institution, be able to help you find a way around the institution. So all those kind of obligations in addition to just responding to the artistic side of it. And then you have a second supervisor, and this second supervisor can be external, can be from abroad. That depends on who is right for your project. And I think very often it will be that the second supervisor is the real specialist in exactly what you're working on. Also, of course, many projects have a richness that means that they need 2 specialists, with specialists in different fields or coming in from different angles. But when we're saying that we want to kind of strengthen international collaborations, the supervision role within this program is part of that picture.
Teaching is paying for this.
The teaching. The supervisors are covered outside of your budget. But of course, if you need someone to fly in from Southern America every time, then we might have to consider that.
And do we have any teaching responsibilities?
Yeah, in terms of, no, they are limited. You're expected to be part of the institution and kind of contribute to the institution, and to do some teaching activities specifically, or specifically relating to your project, sharing from your project. But it has a very limited extent, because you don't really have the time for it. You don't really have the time to it, but it's still very nice if you're able to share. But you will not be expected to run courses. In the future, we are going to change the program from being 3 years to being 4 years. And when it becomes 4 years, then there will be 25% teaching obligations. But that's not part of this announcement. So for you, that's not the case.
Okay, but that might be in 2 years, that's...
Yeah, 2 year, 1 year. We'll see.
Okay.
We'll see. We'll see. We'll see. Some of us are pushing for it, and some are thinking of the budget. The way it is. Any more questions?
About the supervisor, can we choose them ourselves, or at least one of them? If we know of somebody who's writing or doing or have done a PhD abroad, can we have a saying in picking them?
You have a say. You have a say. It's the goal of everyone here is to set up this in a way that is the best possible for you in your project. So there's no one that wants to be difficult just to be difficult. So this is like a conversation between you, the main supervisor, and me as head of research and the dean within the department. And we just try to find good solutions. People that we know will be supportive and able to be useful to the project.
I just want to add that speaking of what sort of department you think is naturally good to belong to, it's a good tip to actually check out what are the faculty members in each department, because it's a matter of what kind of community you want to belong to, more than what you feel that where your discipline belongs. So because you are, as a fellow, you are supposed to be integrated in an academic community, an artistic community. That is, I think it makes sense to sort of motivate that in the application as well.
Any more questions? Yeah?
If and when one is, I decide I want to apply to the visual arts department, and yet the person I feel within the bigger academy, within the bigger school, the person I feel should or can supervise me effectively is from design.
That's fine.
Can a person be imported as a supervisor?
Yeah, that's already been done.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. And it's also, I mean, it like might be that this discussion is giving this impression that we have like these strict divides, walls between the departments, but I think that's not entirely the case. There is a lot of conversations, there are lots of collaborations and exchange going on between the departments. And I think like generally what I see with the research fellows we do have here is that there is a lot of collaboration and exchange and use of resources, often in very surprising ways across all the departments. And this is something that we want to encourage in the future also, when it's to the best for the project. That's one.
Hi. I'm just wondering, is it like working time from 9 to 3? You have to be at school every day, or do you understand what I mean?
No. It's we're flexible. I think we're flexible. I mean, it's like academic staff doesn't clock in and clock out, and I think in general we try to keep meetings daytime. So that, for instance, know that if you have kids in kindergarten, that it's sort of like respecting that you have to have normal working hours. But I think like the workshops, they're open till 12 o'clock in the evening, so you can't work at night there. And I think like generally the school is closed at night. But it's a high degree of flexibility, and I don't think we spend a lot of time being concerned that the artistic research fellows aren't working enough. We trust them, and for good reasons.
Hi. I just wanted to ask you something about the office or a space where the artist or the researcher work.
Yeah, that's something we're trying to figure out currently, because it's been a bit ad hoc so far. We're trying now to find dedicated spaces so that each of the research fellows have a small studio for themselves if they need it. But there's a limit to how big it can be. So it's sort of like a 40 square meter studio that's out of reach for us. We don't have the space for it. But we're trying for the ones that we're trying now to find a way of being able to offer maybe a 15 square meter studio for the artists, so that they have like a desk, can have books there, can have a table, have some walls to work on. So it's modest, but more than just a small desk in an office landscape, because we know that most of the artists can't work like that.
But so if one has to have an atelier out of this, do this have to be into the budget?
If you need like a much larger project space. Yeah, I mean, as an example, imagine that you're working with very large scale paintings, and you work with them in large series where you need to see all of them at the same time. That would be one example where it's very difficult for us to provide, like the studio space for that. Yeah. Of course, then for us, kind of like the question in return would be, how do we ensure that you are still actively taking part in the research community at the school and are not just off-site all the time. But there are limits to how much space we have, and I think like the number of students, the number of activities are expanding here, which is adding more and more pressure. So we have to be realistic.
Well, is it any age limit to apply?
No. I think that would be illegal.
Before there used to be a limit of that you could only apply at KHiO and not in Bergen at the same time. Is that still on?
No, and I think that was as long as all of these applications ended up being handled by the NARP. But I mean, now we are more and more owning the program ourselves. So we sort of, I mean, even if we collaborate on the research school, we're independent from each other. So it is possible to apply more than one place. But the application, at least this year, the application deadlines differs. I think, you know, we are among the later ones, I think. Question over here. Yeah. Yes.
I don't know if it's an important question, but what if you have a master in visual art and you want to work in theater or dance? And you are experienced in theater and dance, but your education is from another field. Is that good or bad? Or
I think that's when, I mean, like early on when we're talking about, you know, what are the formal qualifications. I think this is where it would depend on your real competency. So the documentation and the CV would then become very important to see. You know, in order to because this would, rather than looking at the paper saying that you have you were educated as in fine arts and you're applying for a project within fine arts. I mean, here you have a different education, so we'd have to see the, you know, evaluate the qualifications based on your work. So then that becomes important. But the documentation is always important. Seems like we're done. Then thank you for showing up and having the interest in the program. I hope we see lots of really good project applications, and good luck with the process. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I can